All right, today we're diving deep into one specific piece of the massive EU AI Act, Article 21. And what's so interesting here isn't just the rule itself, but the incredible legislative journey, really a battle that shaped it from a simple idea into the complex, balanced rule we have today. So what is Article 21? Well, at its core, it's pretty much the official rulebook for cooperation. It's the part of the law that says, hey, if you're a company building a high-risk AI system, you have to work with the regulators, the watchdogs whose job it is to make sure these incredibly powerful technologies are actually safe and compliant. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the core question they were trying to solve. Then we'll get into the legislative tug-of-war that happened. After that, we'll look at the 4 key battlegrounds where they really fought it out. Then we'll see how they forged the final compromise. And finally, wrap up with the impact and why all of this really matters. All right, first up, the core question. This really gets to the very heart of the massive challenge that lawmakers were facing when they sat down to write Article 21. And here's the central dilemma they were wrestling with. How do you create these effective watchdogs for high-risk AI without completely stifling innovation or, compromising trade secrets? I mean, on one hand, you absolutely need strong oversight to build public trust and stop things from going wrong. But on the other hand, if you push too hard, you could crush innovation and force companies to give away the very secrets that make them competitive. It's a classic tightrope walk. And that core question, it leads us right into this legislative tug-of-war. Seriously, this was not a simple, clean process. It was a messy, multi-year negotiation between 2 completely different philosophies on how you should even regulate AI in the first place. So in one corner, you had the European Parliament. Their vision was all about maximum oversight. They wanted broad cooperation that even included EU-level bodies. They pushed for much stronger safeguards and confidentiality rules, and they wanted a higher bar for any information requests. But in the other corner, you had the Council. Their vision was all about streamlined enforcement. They wanted to keep it simple, focused just on national authorities. They had fewer explicit mentions of confidentiality and wanted a lower threshold for information requests to make things move faster. And this huge philosophical divide played out for 3 years. You can see it on the timeline. The Commission kicked things off with their proposal in 2021. Then, for the next 2 years, 2022 and 2023, the Parliament and the Council were just going back and forth, pushing their own amendments, reasserting their positions. It was a real battle. Finally, in 2024, they hammered out a compromise, and it became law. Okay, so that brings us right to the heart of the conflict, the 4 key battlegrounds. To actually get a deal done, lawmakers had to find some kind of middle ground on 4 very specific and very high-stakes issues. First up, battleground number 1, scope. The question here sounds simple, but it's actually profound. Who are the watchdogs? I mean, who gets to do the investigating? Should that power only belong to the national authorities in each country, or should bigger EU-level bodies get involved too? And you can really see the Parliament's influence right here in this table. Look, the initial proposal back in 2021, national authorities only. The Council's versions in 22 and 23, same thing, national only. But the Parliament, they kept pushing for a bigger scope, wanting to include the AI Office and the Commission. And guess what? They won. The final act in 2024 says any competent authority. That means both national and EU level. All right, battleground number 2, the trigger. This is all about what actually starts an investigation. What's the legal threshold for an authority to demand information? Can they just knock on your door, so to speak, for any reason at all? Or do they need to have a justified reason to start asking questions? And you can see this back and forth playing out again. The initial proposal said any request. Then the Parliament came in and said, no, it has to be a reasoned request. The Council pushed back, reverting to any request. But in the end, the Parliament's view won out. The final act says reasoned request. And this is a huge deal because it's meant to prevent those overly broad fishing expeditions where regulators could just dig around without a good cause. Next up, battleground 3, access to logs. Now this is a big one. We're talking about getting access to the AI's black box, the super sensitive system logs that show exactly what it's been doing. So naturally the debate was all about how regulators could get their hands on this kind of data. But what's really interesting here is that this was one area where everyone pretty much agreed. While they fought tooth and nail over the trigger for general information, all sides seemed to understand that accessing the logs was different. It's so sensitive that, from the very beginning, they all agreed it had to require a reasoned request. And that brings us to our final, and maybe the most critical battleground, especially if you're a business: confidentiality. I mean, think about it. If you're a company and you're forced to hand over all this sensitive data, how can you be sure your trade secrets, your intellectual property, are actually going to be protected? This table just brilliantly shows how persistent the Parliament was on this point. The initial proposal in 2021, it said nothing about confidentiality. So the Parliament fought to add explicit protections. Then the Council came in and removed them. But the Parliament didn't give up, and in the final act, the protections weren't just back in, they were made even stronger, with a direct link to the super strict confidentiality rules in a different section, Article 78. So, after all that back and forth, all that debate, where did we land? What does the final rule actually look like in practice? That brings us to our next section, forging the final compromise. So the final version of Article 21 really ended up blending the two visions. It stands on three main pillars. First, reasoned request is now the standard. Authorities can't just go on a whim, they need to justify their requests. Second, cooperation is broad. Both national and EU-level authorities can get involved. And third, confidentiality is robust. Any information a company hands over is now protected under the strict rules of Article 78. So if you're an AI provider, what does this actually mean for you day to day? Well, the process is pretty clear now. Step 1, a reasoned request arrives from a competent authority. Step 2, you provide the key documentation or logs they've asked for. And step 3, and this is the crucial part, you can do all this with the trust that your sensitive information is legally protected under those strong Article 78 rules. All right, let's zoom out and wrap this up by looking at the impact and the broader context. After all this, why does this one, single, hard-thought article matter so much? Well, because Article 21 is more than just a rule on a page. It's a carefully balanced framework that's really designed to build trust. It gives regulators the tools they need to do their job and make sure AI is developed responsibly, which helps the public feel confident. But at the same time, it gives innovators that legal certainty and protection they need to keep pushing the envelope without worrying their trade secrets are going to get leaked. It's also really important to see how this fits in with other big EU laws, like GDPR. You can think of the AI Act and GDPR as two different shields that work together. GDPR, as you probably know, is all about safeguarding individuals' personal data and privacy. Article 21 of the AI Act, on the other hand, is focused on safeguarding a company's trade secrets and confidential business info during an investigation. They work in tandem, but they protect two different but equally important things. And that really leaves us with one big final question. Right now, this law represents a carefully constructed balance, a hard-won compromise for the AI of today. But we all know AI is evolving at a dizzying pace. So the real test, the big question, is whether this balance between oversight and innovation can actually hold up against the AI of tomorrow.